Welcome to the Sandwich Generation podcast, a resource for adults balancing the dual responsibilities of raising children and caring for aging parents. Whether you're helping your parents downsize, explore real estate options, navigating caregiving, or looking for practical advice to help your family thrive, this is the place for you. Join us as we bring you expert insights, heartfelt stories, and actionable items to support you and your family within this unique generation.
I saw you coughing. Hello. We're sickly here in central Indiana.
I know. I'm like, oh crap, I'm going to cough right when we're about to go live. Oh, well, it's fine.
You made it.
I've had all three of mine home. You've got one of yours home.
I was sick too, but not as bad as I feel like she is. Like I just had a migraine headache.
Yeah. Oh, I know. All three of mine have definitely had the flu, the fever, my oldest slept for 24 hours straight. Just never, I kept going in and like making sure she was alive.
She was alive?
Yeah. I'm like, is she okay? Is she like, yeah. And she just could not wake up. And it was crazy. And they all three of them just slept and slept and slept. But they're finally all three back at school today. Yay.
Yay. I know. I keep telling my daughter, email your teachers, get on Canvas. And, you can be working on your homework now because it's going to suck being 3 days behind or whatever. So
playing catch up's never fun.
Yes. Yeah. What are we talking about today?
We are going to talk about signs that it may be time to downsize and what that looks like. So I know both of us have lots of experience and stories from clients and from years past. And so I just thought we'd go through and chat about, things to be aware of with your parents as you're watching them age, and some things that, if you're aware of, you might recognize and be able to, start having those conversations with them if it's time. So signs it may be time to downsize. So we're going to chat about that.
Yeah, that's great. Start having conversations and or just sort of thinking and starting to put your ducks in a row then, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Ideally, you never want this to be like a rushed process. So if you can start early, that's the best way to go about it for sure. So I definitely have notes today. So if you see me looking down or shuffling, that's what I'm doing.
That's where you're at. Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, we like notes and we like slides because some of us are just visual learners. Some of us are audible learners, right? Isn't there? There's some science behind that. So we'll do both. We'll give the visual learners what they need to take this in, and we'll give the audible audio learners what they need.
Yep.
So do you want to start with the slides and just dive right in?
I say we dive right in.
All right.
So there's 7 different things to kind of be like managing or aware of.
Wait, do you want me to go to that one first?
Yeah, no, this is it. That's it. Home maintenance.
Oh, that's it. Sorry.
Yep. You're good.
We didn't practice this part.
No, we didn't. But that's okay. So there's 3 on this one, and then the other 4 on the next. So we'll just go through them and we'll chat about them, like what that means, what each one means. But so the first one, home maintenance becomes overwhelming. So we see this a lot with our clients now with the deferred maintenance, right? A lot of their houses have had years of deferred maintenance because it's just become too overwhelming and they can't do the things that they used to do, or unfinished repairs, things like that.
Or just simply not maintaining a house the way that we're used to seeing our parents or our loved ones, whoever it might be, maintain their house. I'm sure all of us know at least one person who is just super meticulous about how they keep their house. And then, they start to age, and one day you go over there and you see things that are like that's odd. That never would have happened, 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah,
They wouldn't have.
absolutely. I think a lot of people, especially when your parents are out of town or you don't live in the same state and so you don't visit very frequently,
Yeah.
you really will become aware of it when you're like visiting for around the holidays and things like that.
Mhm.
It's like, oh wow, this looks very different than it did last year or a couple of years ago, that kind of thing. So yeah, the like yard work and cleaning and just the general upkeep of the house are definitely things to be aware of and be kind of watching for. Clutter.
Even just clutter, even just things as simple as caulking that needs to be replaced. Again, I'm talking about if you know somebody who's super meticulous about how they keep their house and you go over there years later, whatever, you travel to visit them and you just notice. I might be speaking from experience, but I'm not going to name names here. But you might notice, that's not something that they would have let go
Mm-hmm.
in the
Yeah.
past. So, yeah.
Yeah. Dusting, things like that. Like those are things that,
Mm-hmm.
typically people stay up on. And then if you're starting to notice like, oh yeah, that's definitely not the way they used to keep house kind of things.
Right.
The other thing I would notice a lot when in my home health care days,
Yeah.
was the pets, caring for pets.
Oh,
If
yeah.
they are, if you're smelling pet urine,
Mm-hmm.
feces, if there's litter boxes not being changed very frequently and there's a smell, if you're all of a sudden smelling that like a pet smell that maybe didn't used to happen, that can be a sign that they're just not able to empty those things as frequently or actually go walk the dog as frequently.
Right.
That
Or take
becomes
the
more
dog out or
challenging.
whatever.
Yeah. So those things can, definitely start to be part of the home maintenance if those things are now happening inside and they shouldn't be. So um, I will never forget
And
the
by the way, oh, go ahead. Sorry, I
I was
interrupted your
just gonna
story.
say I will never forget the day that I sat down in a chair at a lady's house to do a home care assessment with her. And as soon as I sat down, I felt the wetness and I was like,
Oh,
oh
no.
no, what did I just sit in? And then the smell. And I'm like, yeah, I just sat in a chair that this cat has been using as its litter
Oh.
box for who knows how long. And she had
Oh,
no
wow.
idea. I was covered in cat urine. So
That's the worst.
that was really, really fun. So yeah, you never know what might happen or what might pop up.
You had to drive home like that? Sure, hopefully you
Yeah,
had a towel or something in the car.
I had a like a plastic Target bag in my car, and so I put it on my seat and sat on that, and then just
Didn't
went
move.
straight home, got in the shower, and put my clothes in the washing machine. So yeah, fun
Oh,
times.
wow. There's more stories like that to come for sure
Oh yeah, for
because you
sure,
have
for sure.
so many. I was just going to say, these are not, when you start noticing these things, it's not necessarily that you have to go blurting it out to your loved one. You could
Yeah.
just sort of be taking mental notes and sort of um, creep into conversations about things. You don't have to go
Mhm.
blast your loved one about, why is the house so dusty?
Why is
Why
this
is the
so
cat
gross?
smell
Yeah.
like pee? Yeah, it's just you're just collecting data.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's definitely, and we'll get into that at the end too about like kind of ways to start having the conversation with your loved one, but
Yeah,
um definitely, yeah, don't bombard them or, you got to have some tact about it the way you go about it. So,
a little bit.
uh yeah, a little bit. Financial strain is another one. So, those maintenance costs and if they aren't able to do some of those things around the house any longer, like the yard work and cleaning, if the cost to pay for those things to be done becomes a struggle, or they're not able to maybe pay for other things because they are paying for that stuff, that can be a sign. Or just even being able to afford like property taxes and your utilities and that kind of stuff, that can definitely create some financial strain, where it might be time to reevaluate options and see if you can get them in a little bit better situation where they're not having to take care of so much financially. Because as we know, they end up on fixed income. And then, those unexpected costs can really create some anxiety and strain for them, where maybe it just becomes too difficult to do.
Well, I was going to say on that note too, if they do start, if we keep saying they, if your loved one or your parent or friend or loved one, whatever, if they do start bringing in help like lawn care or somebody to whatever, power wash the roof or clean the windows, I think it's also a good idea to figure out who those people are and what they are being charged. Just to make sure that it's kind of, above board and it's in line with general cost of those things so that they're not getting taken advantage of.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the major things that we hear about all the time with the aging population is how quickly they can be taken advantage of. So definitely want to keep
they're the biggest targets.
Yeah, on who those. Anything else you can think of from the financial strain part of it? I mean,
we talked about the cost of maintaining a large home. Are we going to talk about unused space in the home at all? I can't remember if that's on the slides. Okay.
Yeah, underutilized
so
space.
we'll get to that. Yeah, we'll get to that. But yeah, the cost of just maintaining it. And I think at some point we all probably get to a certain age or health that we just you just live in your house and you're not doing the regular maintenance. And not just seniors, but everybody's not a homeowner. And if you're thinking that you're just going to live in your house and sort of let it fall down around you by not maintaining it, I don't think that's the ideal person to be a homeowner, which is a whole other conversation. But it takes time and money and effort to maintain a home. And as we age and our health declines, those things get harder than what they are when you're the ripe old age of, 30s or whatever. So
yeah, definitely. Yep. Next would be health and safety concerns. So this is obviously a major one. And typically where I think a lot of people start to recognize that, it might be time to downsize, move to a smaller house, less to navigate as far as the actual accessibility of the house. So obviously if someone's having falls or near misses on stairs, uneven surfaces, slippery floors can be an issue. And there's some things that we have in our house that you can just get rid of and will help with that. Like area rugs is a huge one. I hate walking into older folks' homes and seeing all the area rugs everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened at some point in years past
in
where
the 70s and 80s.
Everyone thought they needed to have a rug that lined every surface in their house. But this is definitely that generation where they're like, oh, I have this runner here and this runner here. And I'm like, you can't even see the floors that are actually underneath here, which is great when you go to sell one day because your floors are usually in good shape, but they create a fall hazard issue. So falls are one thing, obviously. Difficulty navigating the home due to mobility issues. So being able to get up and down stairs or we see laundry rooms that are in the basement sometimes, especially in the older homes where
Basement with the
that's
stairs
not,
like this deep.
yeah. Oh my gosh, straight up and down, not
Yeah.
a sturdy handrail. I mean, those are just terrifying.
Open stairs, sometimes shaky, wobbly staircases that, you
Yeah,
wouldn't even go down if you weren't having mobility issues.
no, definitely. Um, the accessibility features. So, your accessible showers that are easy to get in and
Yeah.
out of, your grab bars. Um, a lot of people have like that step up from the garage into the house or to the main level. Just looking at things like that, like do their, modifications need to be done or those sorts of things.
I
Cleanliness
never
too. That's also a
Oh, yeah, cleanliness.
safety.
I experienced a lot of what you're talking about right now firsthand. I mean, we talked about it before all the time, but a year and a half ago, I got my hip replaced.
Yeah, your hip. Yeah.
And going up and downstairs, the area rugs, because I had my hip replaced, I wasn't able to lift my feet like I normally would. And so I did find myself tripping over those area rugs. And even still, as
Mhm.
I, work to build the muscle back and everything, firsthand, those area rugs are awful. And then, yeah, the handrails, when you're coming in and out of the house, but also in the shower, just being able to step over that lip on a traditional tub,
Mhm.
and whether you have a handrail or not, that is something that our aging population struggle with, and we need to come alongside them and help out and make sure that they do have a safe environment in that
Yeah.
regard.
A couple things I thought of when I was trying to think back through, like my years of um,
Home
just being
health.
in the home health, and then also even in the senior community. The clutter obviously becomes an issue, but from a health and safety standpoint, the medication clutter that you
Mhm.
see a lot of times with older folks, you know, typically you'll see a kitchen table or a counter that will just have tons of medications on it.
Yeah.
And so, I think I was thinking back to home health days, and the most I ever saw with a lady, I always had a nurse that would come with me and we would do these evaluations. And the nurse would start going through their medications and writing them
Yeah.
down and like making sure. And so we had asked this lady to please bring her, show us what medication she takes. And she's like, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna need some help though. Can one of you come with me?" I'm like, "Okay, yeah, sure." So I get up and I go with
You're
her.
like, how
And
bad can it be?
yeah, right. How much you're talking about? She had an entire laundry basket, like a laundry basket,
A big, like,
filled.
rectangular one.
Yes, filled with
A
medication.
medication that she took every day?
And no. So the thing was is they're not taking them every day. They're old medications, they're things that are
Mhm.
expired, they're things that they different dosages. So maybe they started out
Wow.
on 20 milligrams and now they're on 40 milligrams, but they still have the 20 I
Yeah.
mean, just things like that. So that clutter, and not being able to go through those things and throw those things away the medication clutter can create some major health concerns too. If
Major.
they
That's an overdose waiting to happen.
Absolutely, if they're not sure what they're taking or they're taking the wrong, dosage, that can be really scary. Um,
Yeah.
and then the other one that I thought about was food, expired
Mhm.
food or improper preparation of food. Um,
Yeah.
you just, if they're
That's a
no
big one.
longer able to use that part of our brains that tells us like whether food is done, cooked or all the way, proper handling of food. Some of
Mhm.
those things can become difficult as we age, and sometimes our memory is starting to fail us a little bit. And so if you're noticing foods that just don't look quite prepared properly, or you've started to decide, I don't think I'm really going to eat anything that so-and-so makes anymore, that can be
Yeah.
a really hard conversation to have, but also just things to kind of be aware of. And then expired foods in the refrigerator. So one thing I always tell adult children is, like, when you go visit your parents, like, just nonchalantly find a way to open the fridge.
Yeah.
See
Pilfer through the
what's in
fridge.
there. See what's in there. One is going to give you an idea of what they're eating, and if that needs some, reevaluation as well, but also,
Right.
whether things are sitting too long, they could be eating things that have been far outlived their life of what they should be. So just kind of
Yeah.
keeping an eye on those things too can definitely be helpful for your loved one, but also some signs that, they might need some additional assistance or meal preparation safety from that standpoint. So, yeah.
I was over at a guy's house last week, and it was clear he had a meal delivery service that was delivering healthy meals at one point. But they were all opened, just stacked on his shelf. They had like a corner pulled off on them, and they were all just sitting there, just sitting out. So yeah, he just obviously he was not eating them for starters, and then they were just sitting there rotting basically.
Yeah.
So just because a loved one has a meal delivery service, okay, they're getting healthy meals delivered, but what are they doing once they're delivered? What are they doing with them? So
Yeah.
yeah,
I've seen
I
that
have
too.
animals at my house and a sick daughter. Just FYI, we talked about at the beginning of this podcast. If you hear some shaking or meowing or coughing, going on just right here on the other side of the screen.
Hey, don't
Yeah.
mind the background.
Anyway,
We
right.
have
Don't mind the background noise. Yeah. All
okay.
right. So any more on health and safety?
I think
We could
those are the
probably
main
talk
things.
about health and safety
Yeah,
for quite a long time.
for sure. Definitely.
Yeah.
I'll flip us to the next slide. So social isolation is a huge one. Um, I think a lot of times this is one of the main things that can really help people when they decide to downsize and maybe move into like a little bit closer area of town or closer to family and friends. We see a lot of our clients that are moving because they're moving closer to their kids, which is great.
Yeah.
And that can help with that social. I cannot say that word today.
Social isolation.
Isolation. Um, so yeah, if they're just living too far from family and friends and, some of the social activities, those sorts of things, because transportation can often become an issue where they're no longer driving or aren't driving after a certain time of day, when it starts to get dark, they're not driving. That can create a lot of that, just feeling like they're alone, the loneliness of that. Um, so keep an eye on that stuff. Car accidents can be a sign that transportation could be an issue, and then they're going to have to rely on other people to get them places. If they stop going to regular activities that they've always done, so church is a huge one
Yeah.
for people. If your parent has always gone to church on Sundays and then all of a sudden you're starting to see that they're not going as frequently, that can be a sign that they're feeling kind of isolated, or they're not able to get there. They don't have that person that can take them, or they can't drive themselves. The gym, exercise, those kinds of things. Like if it's somebody that's always gone, to the Y and different things like those social isolate. I cannot say that word. I'm just going to stop trying. Stop trying.
I was going to say something on that too. I did a video years ago about this. When we stop trusting our body to support us, those are things like, well, I'm not going to go to, just example here in central Indiana when it's freezing in January and February. I'm not going to go to church today because it's icy out and I cannot afford to fall or something like that. So they don't go. Just things like that. Just being able to trust, just overall trust their body to hold them and support them. Yeah. And that's social isolation.
Yes.
I mean, it can lead to a downward spiral of, some loneliness and depression and it just can kind of snowballs the snowball effect and can make things a lot worse. Just from
those
not being connected to their community.
Yeah, those are definitely things to be aware of in the, like, I think we're going to talk about it, the emotional clues. So that can definitely create some more of that depression and, sadness. So those are definitely things to be aware of.
Yeah.
Underutilized space.
space.
Yeah. You mentioned that one, and that's definitely something we see frequently. Like, they're literally living in a very small percentage of their overall house. One, from sometimes it can be the navigation and the mobility issues. Other times it can be the stuff, the clutter that is, we know there's a bed in that room somewhere, but we can't see it because there's just years of stuff. So they kind of stop going into that area. I know a huge one for a lot of the home care clients I would work with would be their bathrooms. Oftentimes, especially in some of the older homes, there is not a main bathroom on the main floor, but they're no longer safe to navigate up and down stairs. And so their personal hygiene gets limited to, a sink and a toilet. And that's how they're, trying to bathe themselves because they're too scared to go up or down the stairs to the main bathroom. So those are things that you definitely, but a lot of times it's just the overall navigation of the house. Like, they can't get to some of those areas any longer. And so, I'm sure, Lisa, you can talk about how many times have you walked into a basement that someone that owns the house hasn't been in for months, years, because they can't navigate it. And then you find some sort of, it's like, oh, there's been water coming in down here and no one's even seen this. They have no idea.
I was looking for a statistic about what the percentage of house is used in older adults. Let's say, I don't know, 60 and older. Maybe not 60 and older, maybe a little bit older, but I feel like it's probably very low, like maybe 10 to 20% of the house. Well, I didn't find any stats.
I couldn't find a number for that either.
No, but I did find something from the U.S. Census Bureau just saying that over 25% of older households have difficulty going up and down stairs, and that increases to almost 50% as the household ages. So as the oldest, person in the home ages, it goes up to almost 45%. And while we're on the topic, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, it says only about 6% of homeowners aged 65 and older have plans to modify their homes to improve accessibility.
Wow.
Yeah. Which, I mean, we're not quite there yet, but it'll lead to one of our future guests who we're going to have on the podcast. So, speaking about aging in place and home modification and things like that. So, Yeah. So underutilized space.
Yeah. Emotional clues. So that's the we kind of mentioned it in the isolation part, but the loneliness, sadness. If you're just seeing that in them, noticing it. If they're making comments about, it's
I'm
just
going to
too
die
much
soon,
house. Or yeah.
I mean, some are just flat out like that blunt.
Oh yeah. I mean, the things that they will say sometimes, I'm like, well, why would you think that or say that? But
Uh-huh.
um, it can be, if you think about the stuff that they watch and see on TV
Oh, yeah.
throughout the
Every
day,
day, all day.
it is so depressing. I mean, I don't watch the
Yeah.
news because I can't handle it. I can't handle. It's
Not
not
only
that I
the
want to put
news, but the
blinders on.
advertisements,
Oh my
right?
gosh. Yeah. Like
The ads
here's
that come on daily television we've gotten asked this before, Sarah, at our Indy Senior Living Series events about the title fraud, because
oh
they are
yeah.
seeing ads during the day about somebody stealing your title to your house or
Yep.
something. And so it's all these advertisers using scare tactics. So you've got news that's just talking about all the horrible things in the world. And then you've got scare tactic advertisements, and then like old reruns of whatever, Wheel of Fortune. No
Yep.
offense
Yep.
to Wheel of Fortune,
No.
but I mean, I'd
That's
be depressed if
it.
that's what I had to do all day.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so that those are definitely things that, maybe it's time to look at some different type of options that would be a little healthier for them from the, emotional, mental standpoint also. Um,
And I'll say for people who do decide to make a move into, let's say, a senior community like a independent living or an assisted living community, how often have you heard, I'm thinking of one in particular and you know them, their adult daughter, um, she and I have kids that go to the same school. Um, they once they get moved in, the adult
mm.
child they can't even get an appointment with them because mom and dad
Oh,
are
yeah.
so busy in their new community with all the activities that they have going on.
Oh
They
my
have no
gosh,
time
yeah.
for them
Yeah.
anymore.
They're like, "I'm
So, I
calling and
mean,
calling," and they never answer the phone, and I'm like, well, they're like, "Well, we're never home. We're always doing all these
we're
things." I'm
busy.
like, We're
Yeah.
busy." Yeah. So, that is I think for me personally, like if that were what I'm hearing from my parents one day, I would love that. Like if they're so busy doing all these fun activities in their 70s, 80s, like
More
uh,
power to them.
yes, absolutely, for sure. They should be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the last one is the changing neighborhood dynamics. So a shift in neighborhood demographics, all the people that they knew for years and years and years that surrounded them. Unfortunately, a lot of them have passed on, and so the neighborhood is turned over. So they may not know the people around them any longer. There can a lot of times be some safety concerns and issues that will pop up. Where it used to be a really safe area where everybody knew each other, and now it doesn't feel that way. So those can
Yeah.
definitely be um, some things that to be mindful of. But I also one thing that hit me was the amount of food deserts that affect downtown areas where it's you're living in this urban area, but they're to get to a grocery store where they can actually park close to the door, get inside, they're having to drive 30 minutes to get to that grocery store where they can do that. So I think those are things to be mindful of. But then also the people that are kind of the opposite that live really far out. And so
Yeah.
commute to like activities and doctor's appointments and those sorts of things are an all day event for them because they're
Oh,
having
yeah.
to drive, an hour into town.
Mhm.
And, those just readily accessible things that we sometimes take advantage of, can become an issue if they one, don't have the transportation or just aren't safe to drive after a
Don't feel
certain time
safe
of
in their
day.
neighborhood, or yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. Anything else you can think of with the neighborhood dynamics? I mean, we hear about that a lot in real estate for sure. With the
Yeah.
neighborhoods change.
Neighborhoods change. I live in a neighborhood that was built in the 60s, and there are probably still a few people who are like the OGs of the neighborhood, but not very many at all. In fact, my next door neighbors, it's the next generation. Like one of the kids bought, or the house from mom when she couldn't live there anymore. And so, yeah, the neighborhoods start to turn over, and what it used to be, you knew all your neighbors and you could count on them, and maybe you weren't best friends, but you knew you could count on them and call them, in the case of an emergency, maybe is not the case anymore. And that could be that's really important, especially if you don't have children who live nearby or who are accessible in the case of an emergency.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. So now, okay, you're noticing all these things for your parent or your loved one. And now it's like, okay, well, now what do I do? How do we start that conversation?
how do I broach this
we're
topic?
Yeah. And so we're not going to go into like major detail about these, but because that is something we're going to talk more about in a later episode about having difficult conversations with our parents. But I thought we could run through some of them. So, and you mentioned
Sure.
this earlier already, Lisa, but like choosing the right time and place to have the conversation. So if you stop
Yeah.
by for a visit and you notice like, blah, the stove's gross, they're not washing their dishes, like things like that. Like that's probably not the time to harp on them about those things, but
Blast
just
them.
choosing. Yeah. So one thing I have always said is like, don't confront, just like observe and then make note for a later conversation. So,
Yeah.
choosing that right time and place so that they're comfortable. No one's feeling like they need to be on the defense. Um, and definitely avoid it during like stressful emotional times. So if you're taking them to a doctor's appointment and you already are going to be talking about like a lot of different things with health and that kind of stuff, like it's probably not the time to bring up have you ever thought about moving? Like that they just don't need to hear all of that at the same time. So that can not be the right time to do that.
Yeah.
So choose the right time and place. Um Frame the discussion positively. And so I like let's talk about options, not ultimatums.
Sure.
And
Yeah, that's a good one.
I, I use that with my kids too. Like, let's talk
Yeah.
about what options we have, not what's going to happen if you don't do something. So
Yeah.
um, I think that can be important. And, just start exploring maybe some of the different living options and what those might be. Is it a condo has low maintenance and it's closer into town or closer to you as the child, like those kinds of things. So try to keep it positive, try to keep it light in the beginning, I would say would be important.
Right. If you are lucky and you have some proactive loved ones, they will bring the topic up on their
Mhm.
own, and you don't even have to bring it up. I don't even know how many years ago, every time I started visiting my dad, he would take me into the office and he would show me the files. And I was like, at first I was like, okay, even doing this, like, okay, dad. But, now it's more relevant.
Mhm.
Fast forward 5 or 10 years, and he started that conversation. I didn't. And then I was the one that was like weird about it, but if you're lucky, yeah, and you've got some proactive loved ones there that they'll bring it up themselves. And then I would say just let them lead the conversation in that regard, if that's the case.
See where their head is and what they're already thinking about. So, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that falls like right into the next one, like listen to their concerns. So just, be mindful of what they're telling you without them really telling you. Those little comments
You're
of
really
like, well,
good. I have to say, Sarah, you're really good just because your history and your background and experience. You're really good at reading between the lines and things. And
yeah,
I would
I mean, I
say
try.
that I try. I mean, you really are. I've seen you a couple that where one of them had some memory issues. You were really quick to catch that and sort of read between the lines. And I think that's a good skill to have in a situation like this too. When you've got some loved ones that are sort of getting up there in age and starting to transition and talking to you about it, just being able to sort of read between the lines and maybe not that you have to address every single thing that is popping into your head, but just like you said, taking notes and collecting data.
Yeah. And I think, just being aware of little things. So like they may not come out and I have an alarm that's going to go off on my phone. So I'm turning that off really quick. The little things like they may not come right out and say, oh, I can't take care of all this anymore. I got to move. Like the chances of that happening. I mean, if they give you that, great, go with it. But they might make little comments.
Meet them where they
like,
are. Meet them where they are, right?
Yeah. And I
Meet
mean,
them
just
where they
little
are.
things where they might make a comment about, oh, it just feels like it's too much house lately. Like, it's a lot to clean and keep up with. They might just make little comments like that where it's okay, just so being aware of those things. Start the conversation early. This is one thing that I think every educational series we have done in 10 years, it is one of the number one pieces of advice that our experts and our panelists will give is start the conversation early. You want to know what they want to do, what their plan is, way before you actually need to make that transition. Because the worst situation to be in is when it's like an emergency situation, right? And you've been told that your loved one cannot go back to their home safely without 24-hour around the clock care or something like that. So just having those conversations so that you kind of have an idea of what the plan is going to be if something like that happens. But and then the earlier you start it, the easier it is to just continue the conversation.
Yeah, I was just going to say, because if you are at the hospital with them and they say can't come home, now you're in an emergency situation, you have less options, and also you're making decisions based on your emotions. And you talk about something that you tell your kids. I tell my kids, don't trust your emotions. Don't act out of your emotions, like in the moment of things. Like take a minute, take a beat, and then come back to it, because when we're reacting out of our emotions, we're not reacting rationally always. So, yeah.
Good advice. Involve them in the decision making. So getting their input, getting their thoughts, if they're giving you those little nuggets of, little tidbits about maybe they're starting to think about some changes, like, get their thoughts, get their decision, what their decisions would be. Let's see. And
Also,
then the
another thing,
emotional part
I
too.
know we're going to wrap up soon, but because this is longer than I expected. On the involve them in the decision making, another thing we do tell them at Indy Senior Living Series, which our audience is the seniors themselves. Our audience for this podcast is the adult child. So what we're telling the seniors is you make the decisions while you still have the mental capacity and the physical capacity to make those decisions, because they're your choices. So we're telling them that. And so now it's just, I think it's not full circle, but it's great to be able to be here on this podcast and also tell the adults, the adult children, involve them in the decision making, because that's important. We all want to be in control of ourselves and the choices that we make, right? So
absolutely. Yeah. So be patient with them. That's one of the, next little tips. Be patient. It's likely going to take several discussions, can often take years of just talking
right.
about it. There's going to be a lot of emotions involved. So being, patient with that and addressing those emotional attachments that they're going to have to the house and the things that are in the house, and not wanting to leave that. So yeah, be patient and then use stories and examples. So, if you have friends that are going through this and they are sharing information about what worked with their parents or what went horribly wrong with their parents,
Yeah.
use those things to kind of guide your own conversations. But
Yeah.
you can casually bring up like, oh, hey, so and so, she just moved her parents into an independent living community and they're loving it. Like, just casually bring up those things if
Yeah.
you can, and work them into a conversation and see where the conversation goes. If they totally avoid it, or tell you, well,
They're
I'm
not
never
there
doing
yet.
that, then it's just not the right time and place. But examples that you can give, or things that you're hearing from your friends and family and coworkers or whatever, use those things to
You're going
guide
to be
your own
planting the
conversation.
seed. Yeah,
Mhm.
and planting a seed. Maybe they aren't there yet, but you're planting a seed, and you might come back next week and they tell you a story that is like the story that you just told them last week. And don't say, I know, I told you. I just told you that
Yeah,
last week. Just let them think it's their idea.
that's right. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Stories are
So, yeah.
great.
So I think that
Well,
about wraps it up.
anything else, Sarah? I know this was, like I said, longer than what we expected, but really good information. I hope our audience liked it. And I hope if you guys are watching out there, leave some comments for us and questions that we can address here on our podcast. Like it, share it, follow, all of that stuff, right?
Absolutely.
Yep.
And we will see you next Thursday with a new episode.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.